The February cold in Vancouver doesn't just chill you. It settles into your bones and stays there, like an old grudge you can't quite shake. I pulled my coat tighter as I crossed the Granville Street Bridge, the gray sky pressing down on the water below. I was already running 3 minutes late for my shift, and the hospital's automatic doors felt like a mercy when they finally slid open and swallowed me whole. Emergency nursing in a level 1 trauma center doesn't leave much room for feeling sorry for yourself. I'd learned that the hard way over the past 6 years, ever since I came back from a year in Toronto, with a broken engagement, a maxed-out credit card, and a daughter growing quietly inside me that I didn't know about yet. Mia was 5 now. She had my stubbornness and her father's eyes, which was the universe's idea of a joke, I suppose. I tucked my lanyard under my scrubs as I walked to the nursing station, grabbed my assignment sheet from the board, and poured the first of what would be at least 4 coffees. Bay 7 was mine for the night, a 43-year-old with chest pain, a teenager who'd come off a snowboard wrong, and a transfer from Vancouver General that hadn't arrived yet. Some kind of VIP. The charge nurse had whispered with raised eyebrows. Private security. Do not photograph order on the chart. I didn't have the energy to be curious. By midnight, I'd nearly forgotten about the transfer. I was restocking the supply cabinet in the hallway when I heard the elevator doors open and the unmistakable sound of a gurney rolling in, accompanied by too many pairs of feet for a normal patient arrival. 3 men in dark coats, 1 paramedic, 1 woman in a blazer speaking quietly into her phone. And then the patient himself, conscious, I noticed immediately, which was unusual given the urgency, sitting half upright on the gurney with a blood-soaked compress against his right side. I stepped back instinctively to let them pass, and then he turned his head. 7 years disappeared in an instant. Not gradually, not slowly the way people describe it in movies. Just gone. Like someone had unplugged the intervening time and plugged back in the last moment I'd seen him, standing in the doorway of a rented apartment in the Annex, Toronto, telling me he had to go. That his family needed him, that he was sorry and that he'd call, and that he loved me. He'd looked at me the same way he was looking at me now, like he was memorizing something he was afraid of losing. Except now his jaw was sharper. There was gray at his temples that hadn't been there before. And the men surrounding him were not the kind of people who showed up for a software developer from North Vancouver. His name was Nathan. He was 34 years old. And apparently he was no longer any of the things I thought I knew about him. Bay 12, I heard myself say, because that was the private room, and whatever was happening here clearly required a private room. The charge nurse gave me a look and I shook my head slightly. Later, I assigned him to my colleague Priya and stepped into the medication room and stood there for approximately 45 seconds, doing nothing at all. My hands weren't shaking. That surprised me. Then I walked back out, because I was a professional and someone was bleeding, and my feelings were not relevant. It took another hour before he was stabilized. Laceration to the right flank, deep but clean. No organ involvement. Lucky in the way that people are lucky when the thing that was trying to kill them was slightly off-center. Priya was thorough and efficient, and I was grateful not to be in that room. I charted from the station and tried not to look through the glass. At 1:17 a.m., his security team stepped into the hallway for a rotation change. I don't know why I walked in. I told myself I was checking the IV line. Maybe I was. He was awake. The overhead light was dimmed and he looked smaller than I remembered, which was a strange thought, because he'd always been broad-shouldered, the kind of person who took up space in a good way. "Hey," he said, just that. "Your potassium is low," I said. "We're running a supplement through your IV. You might feel a mild burning sensation." A pause. "That's what you're going with. I'm your nurse on transfer coverage. You're the woman I was going to marry." I checked the drip rate. "You were never going to marry me. You left." He didn't say anything for a moment. Outside, somewhere down the corridor, a monitor beeped steadily. "I need to explain something to you," he said. "You don't need to explain anything. You need to rest and let your body recover from significant blood loss." I clicked my pen and made a note on the chart. "Is your pain level manageable?" "No," he said, and I knew he wasn't talking about the laceration. I left the room. I sat in the break room at 2 a.m. with a cold cup of tea and a granola bar. I wasn't eating and thought about Mia, who was at home with my mother, who would be asleep, who would have no idea that the night had taken this particular turn. My mother had always liked Nathan. She'd asked about him for the first year after he left, gently and then less gently, and I'd eventually told her something vague about distance and different paths, and she'd stopped asking. I hadn't told her about Mia's father. Mia thought her father was not in the picture, which was what I'd said when she was 3, and I hadn't expected her to remember it, and then she'd repeated it at daycare, and I'd had to live with it ever since. The door opened and Priya leaned in. Your transfer is asking for you specifically. Tell him I'm not his assigned nurse. I did. She tilted her head. He said to tell you that he knows about Mia. The granola bar hit the floor. I didn't pick it up. He was sitting up slightly when I returned. The color was coming back to his face. He'd always recovered quickly, had always had that annoying physical resilience that I'd teased him about once, a long time ago, in a different life. How do you know about her? I asked. I came back, he said. 8 months ago, I looked for you. You'd moved from the apartment, and your number was different, and I didn't feel like I had the right to push. So I hired someone to find you. Not to. I'm not explaining this well. He stopped. I know her birthday is March 14th. I know she likes dinosaurs, and she's in senior kindergarten at a school in Kitsilano. I know she has a piece of my grandmother's stubbornness and your eyes. My mouth was dry. You've been watching my daughter, our daughter. His voice was careful, not aggressive, just careful. Like he was handling something he was terrified of breaking. I found out 6 months ago. I didn't know, when I left. I swear to you that I didn't know. It wouldn't have changed anything, I said, because I needed to believe that was true. It would have changed everything, he said, and I hated that his voice didn't waver when he said it. I had stood in rooms with people who were dying and kept my voice level. I had called families at 3 a.m. and told them things no one should ever have to hear. I had held it together through my own labor because my mother was crying and someone had to be steady. I was good at steady. But standing in Bay 12 with Nathan looking at me like that, I felt the steadiness crack somewhere deep underneath. Why didn't you come to me? I asked. 8 months ago. 6 months ago. Why didn't you just knock on the door? Because I've spent the last 7 years doing things I'm not proud of, he said. Because I wasn't sure the person I'd become was someone you should let near your child. Because I needed to know, first, whether I could actually change. Whether I could become someone who deserved to be in her life. His jaw tightened. I haven't figured that out yet, but I didn't get to choose the timing on tonight. No, he hadn't. The story of the intervening 7 years came out in pieces over the next 2 hours. Between my legitimate medical checks and his security team's increasingly pointed looks through the glass. His family, his uncle, specifically, had been involved in things Nathan had known about abstractly, and then known about concretely when a particular situation required him to make a choice. He'd spent 3 years trying to extract himself, 2 years under a different kind of obligation that he was still working to untangle. A year in a kind of voluntary exile that hadn't stuck the way he'd hoped. He was not, he said, a good man by most definitions currently available to him. He was trying to become one. That's a convenient story, I said. Not cruelly, just honestly. I know, he said. People who are doing the right thing don't usually need 3 bodyguards and a do not photograph order. No, he agreed. They don't. There was something I had not expected in this conversation, and it was the absence of excuses. I had rehearsed this confrontation in my head. Not often, not obsessively, but in those 2 a.m. moments that come for every person who has been left without explanation. And in every version he either justified himself thoroughly or collapsed into apology. He was doing neither. He was just sitting in a hospital bed telling me the truth. And the truth was complicated and unflattering and didn't resolve into anything clean. I respected it more than I wanted to. I don't know what you want from me, I said finally. I want to meet her, he said. That's the only thing I'm asking. Not tonight, obviously. Not on your timeline that I've disrupted. But eventually, if you're willing. I know I don't have the right to ask. You're right, I said. You don't. He nodded. He didn't push. I stood at the foot of the bed for a moment, looking at this person who was a stranger, and also in some irreducible way. Not. He had given Mia her stubborn jaw and her way of tilting her head when she was thinking hard about something. He had given her, I'd always privately thought this, her laugh, which was too big for her small face, and which erupted at inconvenient times, and which was the best sound I'd ever heard. I could hate him cleanly, or I could do the harder thing. I have never in my life taken the easy option. My mother says it's my greatest strength and my most exhausting quality. I need to think, I said. Okay. I need you to not contact me while I'm thinking. Okay. And I need you to understand that whatever I decide, it's based on what's right for her. Not for you. Not for me. For her. I wouldn't want it any other way, he said. I picked up the chart. I made my notes. I walked out. The last 2 hours of my shift passed in the particular slow-motion way that only happens when your body is running on adrenaline and your mind has gone somewhere else entirely. I discharged 3 patients and admitted 1, and helped a first-year resident with a procedure and did not go back to Bay 12. When the day shift came in at 7, I gave my hand off, pulled on my coat, and walked out into a February morning that had cleared overnight. The mountains across the water were white and sharp against a sky that had turned unexpectedly blue. The air smelled like snow and salt, and the coffee someone was brewing in the cafe across the street. I sat in my car in the parkade for 10 minutes. I called my mother. "How was your shift?" she asked. "Long," I said. "Did you eat?" "Sort of." Mia made you a drawing. She says it's a triceratops, but honestly, it looks more like a very aggressive table. I laughed despite everything. It came out a little wet at the edges, and my mother, because she is my mother and has known me for 31 years, noticed immediately. "What happened?" she asked. "Something I need to tell you about," I said. "But not on the phone. I'll be home in 20 minutes. I hung up and sat for another moment with my hands on the wheel. On the seat beside me was the piece of paper I'd been carrying without thinking. His discharge summary, which I'd picked up off the desk out of habit and not returned. At the bottom, in a handwriting I hadn't seen in 7 years, he'd written a number. Just the number. No name, no message. I put it in my coat pocket. I didn't throw it away. I pulled out of the parkade and onto the street, and drove toward Kitsilano through the cold blue morning toward my mother's kitchen. And Mia's laughing, and an aggressive table that was maybe a dinosaur. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't have a clean answer, and I wasn't going to pretend I did. But for the first time in a very long time, I thought the question itself might be worth sitting with. Not running from, not answering too quickly, not letting fear make the decision for me, the way it had quietly been making my decisions for 6 years. The mountains were still sharp, the sky was still blue, and my daughter was waiting at home with a drawing that was just for me, and that, at least, was something solid to hold on to.